All right, so let's now just take your questions. Michael, go ahead.
I do have a list of questions. I didn't know where to put it because it doesn't seem like there was a Google Doc made for this week's lecture. So I
There
just
was
put
no
it.
actually, so that's why I said yesterday. Just bring your questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I put them in week 10's document, but I can just tell you them
Yep,
right now.
I think that'll be easier. Yeah, go ahead. Just tell me what the questions are.
So my first one is is about invoking a static method. So you established in lectures a few times already that like when you invoke a static method, you use the class name instead of a context object.
Correct.
So then that means that the class name is not considered in of itself a context object. A class name isn't a context object, correct?
Actually, you know what? Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, let me just make the simplest example here. Okay, so let's say this. So we got, let's say, let's not worry about public. Let's say class A over here. And then if we got, let's say, static, let's say integer, let's say get get I, for example. Let's get some counter value. Let's say get I. Okay, and then we got some implementation here. Let's say this is our definition here. Okay. Okay, and then let's say outside the context of this class, if you want to invoke this method here, let's say get I, because it was declared as static. So you're right. All we need to do will be a dot get I. Okay, so your question was, okay, here you should really thinking this way. So number one, A is a class name for sure. However, I think you may want to avoid thinking that A is simply just a context object because A is just a class name. It's not really an object, right? Not really an object. It's not really, okay? And also, number two, okay? Alternatively, what you could have done would be you can say A and then object A. Let's say OA is, let's assume that we got some default constructor and then new A. And then here, if you say OA dot get I, and this is also considered as okay. This is also fine. However, what you will see is it's going to be a warning. You're basically invoking static method in a non-static way. It's not really an error, but it's considered as a warning. Okay, and of course, this OA here, you're basically is a context object. So CO context objects. So Michael, I think just the short answer to your question is you shouldn't really want to think about A as a context object. So the use of dot has some special case. The special case will be whenever you're trying to call the static method. In that case, you will simply just use a class name, but try to avoid thinking that it's a context object. Yeah, otherwise it could be a little bit confusing. Because how can you use a class name as an object? It's simply confusing, right?
Right.
Okay, very good. Next one, please.
I have a few more questions, but maybe
Go ahead.
I should.
Yeah, I'll just go over yours. And so other guys, they can actually also interrupt if they got any follow up. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My next one is because I'm following with week 11's lectures. You were talking about the math class,
Okay.
and you were talking about the public static attributes pi and e. So then, so because we don't usually do this, because in principle we declare attributes to be private. So then you're saying that we can just declare like these attributes like methods and return like the return value. Like for pi, you can just return the value 3.1415.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you know, to benefit others as well, let me give you a little bit more context for everybody. Let me just bring up the math class. So guys, what Michael's question was is, so this has to do with the week 12, by the way. So week 11, there was no lecture. So week 12, I think that's what you meant. So let me just go to the math class quickly. Okay. So if you go to the math class, and then let me double click on that. And then you will see, is it bringing me to the link? Somehow it's not really bringing me there. Okay, for some reason. Java API math class. Let me do it this way. Okay. Okay, anyway. Okay, if we look at the math class, you can see we got field summary. This is kind of special. Typically, if you go to any collection library classes like the array list and hash table that we spoke about in the lecture. So in the math class, they got something called field. You can think about a field is like attributes, okay? According to our OOP principle, all the attributes you declare should be private, meaning that outside classes, if they want to get access to your attribute, for example, let's say you got some private attribute for your bank, maybe for a bank account called balance. In that case, you should have a public accessor called get balance for that, okay? And now you can see that here we simply say E over here, okay? Let me just copy just this part over here. Let's do a little bit of more analysis about this over here quickly, okay? Let me just copy this part over here, and then let me go back to iPad over here. Okay, let me now actually talk about these two attributes quickly. Okay, so that's what we just saw on the API page. Okay, you can see here. So number one, you can see the E over here. You can see there is actually no empty pair of parentheses, right? So this certainly not a method. Okay, you can see E here is not a method. Otherwise, we would have got, just empty pair of parentheses, but we don't have it, so it's not a method, okay? And then it's actually static over here. So how would you actually declare such attributes? The way you would do it is you would simply say something like, for example, if you were to do it by yourself, you actually got class and also math, of course, public. And then you would say public, and then static, and then double, and then you would say E. Okay, and then here you might just maybe initialize that to be maybe 3.14. Let me say pi. Okay, that's the value we are familiar with. I suspect in the math class, maybe they even got a final keyword, meaning that the value of pi never changes. So it might just be a constant over here. So this is what the API suggests to you. Of course, you got other fields and also methods in the same class, right? So that's how we can how we know from this particular declaration over here. What Michael said, another way to do it for us, right? If we follow the OOP pattern that we spoke about so far, you can do, let's say, public, and then class, and then let's say math number 2, okay? Just a second version. So what we can do is we follow our pattern. We can say private, and then let's say private static, right? In order to really use the variable in the static method, the variable itself must be static as well. Otherwise, you get into the referencing non-static variable inside the static context, right? So that's a common error we spoke about earlier. So let's say private static, and then we can say final. Now you can see all the keywords that we have covered. And also double, let's say pi, is simply 3.14, okay? So now notice the following. Given this particular declaration, if I say math dot pi, this will be okay, because I can definitely access the attribute directly because it's public, okay? On the other hand, for this second version I'm putting here, I cannot simply say, if I say math dot pi, so this would not be okay because I declared that to be private, right? So what we should do instead is by declaring a public accessor for that. We can say public also has to be static. And then we can say here double. And then we can say maybe get pi. And here you can simply say return this particular pi, right? This variable here. Okay, I'll let you do it. Okay, so this is just a second version over here. So for the second version, you cannot get access to the attribute directly, but you can actually say math dot get pi. And this will be okay, right? This is fine. Okay. So Michael, that answers your question, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Do you have any more?
I have a few. Is that
Go
okay?
ahead. Yeah, since your fellow student haven't got any new questions, so you can go ahead.
Okay. For week 11, you also talked about guessing a number, the case study.
Yep.
I have my answer because you said, should we use this one or this one? Should we cast?
Or before you say that, why don't we just go to that particular slides, right? Let's go there. If I go there. So guys, by the way, if you check the guide for written test number 3, so we don't, the written test number 3 does not cover Java API. So I think for the API question Michael was asking, so I think just for maybe it would be useful for your exam, maybe not for written test 3, right? Check the coverage carefully over here. Okay, Michael, let me open up the slides over here.
Professor, may I quickly ask, is there a practice test, written test for?
Not for this one here, because that one, the coverage pretty much similar. So I would say I'll try to give you guys maybe some tips, maybe tomorrow, because I'm still working on my questions for the test. Maybe I can, but I would say for now, you should really go over the guide and then study the topics as required, OOP, and also 2D arrays. And then maybe tomorrow, if I cannot make up any question for you for practice, I'll try to give you a little bit more focus about what specific example you should focus on. I'll give you some tip.
Okay.
All right, good. All right, so now, Michael, let me go. Yeah, you're talking about this one here, right? Okay.
Yes.
So which one do you think should be the answer?
The second.
The second one. Why is the first one not a good answer? Can you give me some counter example where it wouldn't work?
Well, I just think because the casting, the typecasting has a higher priority than the multiplication or division operations. So then you're casting Math.random, which creates a random number between 0 and 1. So that means that it's either going to be 0 or 1.
Yeah.
And then you're multiplying the number by 100. So you only get 2 options, 0 or 100.
Yeah, pretty good.
Which is not what you want, right?
Yeah. Actually, you wouldn't even get 100, to be honest, because Michael, that's pretty much correct. Okay, so this one here is not the way to go. Okay, for those of you who are not too sure about this exercise, when you go over the lecture, you will see, right? It's really an important exercise for you to understand. On the exam, we might give you something similar or maybe something related. Okay. So here you can see, as we said, is if you call random over here, if I say Math.random, according to the specification here, it's going to be greater than or equal to 0.0, but less than 1.0. So using the notation you learned from the math class, inclusive on the lower bound, 0.0. However, exclusive on the upper bound. Okay, so that means it cannot really return. It cannot really return any return 1. It just cannot. So it can be 0.0, it can be 0.12, it can be 0.99, right, etc. It just cannot be 1 because it's exclusive according to the API description. Okay, so now if I try to apply this particular expression here, so the cast, what's wrong with this is the cast actually got higher precedence. So it's as if we actually put a parenthesis around here. So this is actually going to first going to do the cast. So what will be the integer cast? If I say casting 0.12, so what will be that value? As Michael said, it's just going to be 0. And then you say 0 multiplied by 100, and then it's going to give you just 0. So it's never going to give you the correct expected number. On the other hand, if you try to use the parentheses over here to force the order, so you are going to, for example, Math.random, let's say this one, if that gives you 0.12, you're going to multiply that by 100. So that's going to give you 12.00. And then if you cast it into an integer, it's going to give you 12. So that would be the way to go, right? Yeah, Michael, just try to extend a little bit about what you just said. But I think I also did similar illustration on the lecture as well. So that's about which one you should really choose. So you should really choose this one here by doing the cast more carefully as opposed to this one. If you simply do this one in your code, it's going to compile. You wouldn't see any problem at the compile time, but you're going to see lots. You're going to see some weird logical error at the runtime, right? That's the key. So, Michael, anything else about this particular question? Or
may I ask? Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Yes. I have another question. So, may I ask for Math.random? Do you generate a number to how many decimal places?
You know, for that one, I'm not too sure how many places. I would suggest you give it a try. It might be simply there's no constraint on the number of digits after the decimal point. So I suppose if you really want to maybe format a string, you can try to follow it. You can say, you can try it out. You can say string the format, right? That's something we have been using. I believe it's $2f, right? Let's say we want to have only two digits after the decimal point. So here you can say Math.random. Okay, I think that's the way to go if you want to format the generated number. On the other hand, if you simply just want to do exactly to really generate something somewhere from 1 to 100, I think in this case you can simply use this expression over here, this one. Yeah, you don't need to format that because when you do the casting, it's going to get rid of the decimal points. It's going to truncate all the digits after the decimal point anyway when you do the casting. Make sense to you, Michael?
Yeah. I was asking that question because I was wondering, like, if Math.random generates a number with like at least 3 decimal places, then it is possible to get to 100, because if it's 0.996 and the typecast rounds to the nearest integer, which in that case will be 1, then 1 times 100 will be 100. Am I wrong?
Nope. When you do casting here, what they do is they don't really try to round up. For example, let's say this. If I got, for example, double, let's say 99.9, right? Oh, actually, let me check what am I writing. Let's say double D is this, 99.9. If I say integer I is simply assigned to, I want to cast E into integer. So now what will be the value for I? So Michael, according to what you said, you think it should be 100, right?
Right.
Nope, it's not the case. It's not what casting does. Whenever you do casting here, you simply just want to convert from your double number into integer. What it does, no, this is no, okay? The casting over here will only truncate, which means to eliminate, truncates all digits after the decimal point. It's not going to do any roundup. No rounding. Okay, so the correct answer should be, it should still be 99. Okay, makes sense to you?
Yes, I just completely forgot about week 1. I'm not
Yeah,
ready for the
that's
exam.
okay. Yeah, it's good to it's good to catch up. You know, it's good to brush up. You know, that's what that's the purpose for the exam. So it's good to actually just make sure you review everything before you write the exam. Okay. All right, guys. Any follow-up question to this about the Math.random? All right, Michael. Any more question on your list?
Yes. I was going over your lecture about ArrayList, and I was blown away by like all this new stuff. So, is it possible if you can reiterate some of the core concepts that you went over?
You mean for ArrayList?
Yes.
You mean, are you more to do with the tracing the code, or it's more about just using the method?
I was confused, like how to conceptualize, like for example, E, like the general parameter E and an object O.
Okay, sure. So what I can do is let me try to give me a moment. Let me just copy this guy first. Let me copy this, which we did on the lecture. I might just reiterate maybe a little bit from there. Okay, good. So when you declare some collection type, so you know what? Let me just copy one more slide, just one more. Oh, actually, that's another one. Sorry about that. It should be 1022. Okay, this one here. Okay, that's the one. Okay. So when you go to the API page for the ArrayList class, okay, that one there is simply declared with a so-called generic parameter E. Okay, so the idea would be we will talk about exactly what's the theory behind having a generic parameter, but it's simply not covered in this course because that would involve the discussion about advanced concepts such as inheritance and also typecasting. So it's not really going to be covered now, but it will be covered in detail in your 2030, the next course in the second year. But for the first year, all you need to know is whenever I say E, the generic parameter, right? It simply just tells me instantiate E by the type of elements in the array list. Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, let's now consider two cases. Okay, let's say here, if let's say I have two decorations, I might have array list string, and then I have, let's say, L1. And also the rest will be about how to use a new keyword. You can refer to that from the lecture. Okay. And then let's have another variable here. And here I have array list. Let's assume we got the class points for two-dimensional point plane. And this will be L2. Okay. And then it's assigned to some new keyword here. So now you can see we are basically using the same class array list over here. But we are actually instantiating the generic parameter E over here. That was the over here. In the first case, we are instantiating it by string. In the second case, we are instantiating it by a point. Okay, that's why you can see syntactically. Okay, but now what's really the consequence, right? The consequence is if you look at the API over here, right? If you look at the API, I'm just using some methods over here. You can see here, for example, let me just highlight the ones about generic parameter. You can see here, we got E here. So here we got return type being E, and also we got also the parameter type being E, right? So this is the general API. However, for any specific declaration you make over here, either for L1 or maybe for L2, the E over here will be instantiated according to your declaration. So that's something the compiler will keep track of. Because in your program, you might declare more than one. You might declare, for example, 50 different types of the list, of type array list. In that case, for each one of them, depending on what the instantiation type is for E, the corresponding API will look a little bit different implicitly. Let's say, for example, let's say here for this particular case, since we instantiated E by just string, so that means for this particular array list, whenever you're trying to add some elements into the list, the E over here will just be replaced by a string. So that means if I want to say L1 dot add, if I say, for example, Alan versus if I say L1 dot, for example, add, let's say 23. And also if I say L1 dot, maybe add. And for now, can we just assume that we actually got P1? Let's say P1 is simply of type point. Can we just make that assumption? Okay, let's make that assumption now. So now, apparently, so Michael, you tell me. So now for L1 over here, so which one should really compile?
P1. Are we looking at type point?
Oh, we're talking about, okay, we're talking about L1 over here. And then I got three options here for you. I got 1, I got 2, and also I got 3. So which one of them, or which ones of them should compile without any problems?
The first one should be the only one that compiles without any.
Just the first one, right? It is. So this one should be okay. On the other hand, the other two should be wrong. They should be error. It is because, let's see this. Because when I declare L1, I declare that to be of type ArrayList by instantiating the E by string. So that means accordingly, every occurrence of E that's mentioned in the API, they will be replaced by string, right? So this part will also be replaced by string. And this will also be replaced by string over here. So now for L1, the compiler would know whenever you want to say add, you should really take string because the E for this declaration here has been already replaced by string. So that's why only this one here is valid. So Michael, so far so good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So guys, if you got any questions related to this, please speak up, right? There's something new to you. On the other hand, let's compare. Let's do some comparison, okay? So now, let's say we talk about L2 over here, right? L2. So now for L2, since we try to instantiate the E by point instead, right? So it's just a different class. So that means I'm going to use a different color here. So that means there's implicitly just another version of the API. E will be replaced by points, and E will be replaced by point. And the return type E will be replaced by point. So now if I try to do another one, let's say 4, 5, and 6, I'm going to say L2 dot, right, L2 over here, L2 dot add ln. You can see I'm only changing the context objects. If I say L2 dot add 23, and also L2 dot add P1, assuming that P1 is a valid reference variable of type point. So now, in this case, which one or which ones should be valid? Anybody? Compare with 4, 5, and 6. Which one or which ones should be valid?
Is it 3 and 6?
But we are done with 1, 2, 3 already, right? So 1, 2, 3 is not, yeah. So 4, 5, or 6. Which one is valid?
That is just 6.
6, yeah, that's correct. You can see 6 over here. So you can see this P1 here is of type point. And then we say L2 has been declared to be where every member is actually a point objects. So that means we simply got point over here, right? Over here. On the other hand, the other ones are simply not valid because L2 is really expecting some point objects. String is not compatible, and also integer is not compatible either, right? So Michael, is it better for now about instantiating the generic parameter?
I do have a follow-up question, but I think Joseph has been raising his hand for.
Oh, sure. So Joseph, you got any question here?
Yeah, I have a question about the object modifier. So like the object parameter, you mentioned in the video that it's a superclass. Like if we were to use the object as a parameter to do some sort of computation, how exactly are we gonna use it?
Yeah. So basically, okay. So the object over here, yeah, I don't really want to get into superclass, subclass over here because that's really something that's way beyond this course because it can be confusing as well. You can think about object over here simply means you can pass any type of objects. For example, over here, if I now try to, let me just talk about L1, for example, L1, okay? You can see L1 according to the add over here. So this is the add method that we spoke about. Because that one originally simply just put E over here, right? And now E has been replaced by string. However, object over here is not replaced by anything. It remains to be just objects. So now just for this one specifically, let's talk about it. For this one specifically, so I can say, let's say, let me try this, 7, 8, and also 9, okay, 7, 8, 9. If I say L1 dot remove, let's say I want to remove maybe Alan from the list. Also, if I want to say L1 dot remove 23 from the list, I can also say L1 dot remove maybe P1. Let's say it's a point objects, right? So now if you look at 7, 8, and 9, as far as compilation is concerned, so which ones are fine, are okay? Should it be simply just like previously? So previously we said only one is okay because Alan over here is compatible with the add over here, which has been replaced by a string for its generic parameter E. But now, what about 7, 8, and 7, 8, and 9 over here? Is it only this one is valid, or all of them? Yeah, exactly. It should be all of them because you can see here, according to this, according to the parameter type, it's simply just objects. So that means Alan is okay, 23 is also okay, and P1 is also okay because anything you can pass is simply just an object in Java. Okay? You might be wondering, why is it the case that when you try to add something to the array list, you have to be compatible with whatever type you have declared the list to be. However, when you try to remove something from the list, you're not simply not constrained. I don't have an answer because that's actually how the ArrayList class has been designed. So not too sure what the developer was really thinking. To me, really, this over here should be declared as E to me. But for some reason, it is not. So I would say from some angle to judge, this is actually quite a poor design for ArrayList. But we got to deal with it is what it is. So Joseph, is it that answer? Does that answer your question?
I still have one more question.
Go ahead.
So if we were to code this on Eclipse, we just have to use object, and then we can use any like floating any data type, and that would still work.
Yeah, you need to remove, right?
Yeah.
Correct. According to the header, according to the parameter type over here, whenever you see object over here, that simply means you can pass any objects, any data type. On the other hand, when you see E over here, right, originally they're simply just E. E here means whatever type it is depends on how you instantiate the generic parameter when you first declare the variable, right? So that's something you've got to be careful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Guys, I think that's great questions you guys are asking. Great. Also, by the way, if we are done answering your question, you may just put your hands down. Otherwise, we might just misunderstood that you might still have a question. Thank you. But feel free to raise your hands again later. Okay. So Michael, does that answer your original question here about generic parameter?
Yes, I do have a follow-up question and then a question that I just thought of when we're talking about objects. But first, I was just wondering, so when you instantiate E by the type of elements, can it be, does it have to be a specific type? Like, does it have to be reference type, or can it be any kind of data type, like primitive?
Good question. Good question. So here, if I say array list, okay, I'll put a question mark over here just to talk about what you can pass over here. And then let's say some list or my list, whatever, right? And then this will be some new keyword usage here. Okay, what can we pass over here? Number one, you definitely can pass any library class. For example, the string class. And for your information, you can also pass array list. You can say array list of array list. You can also say an array list of hash table. It might be hard for you to imagine at this point, but you don't need to worry. I think that's something maybe once you get to the second year, maybe there might be some lab exercises to actually show to you how to manipulate that. But for now, you don't need to worry. Okay. So number one, you can definitely put any library class that you can find from the Java API as the element type. You can have an array list where every element is either a string, an element can be just another list, or pretty much like a 2D array concept. And then another, the element can be a separate hash table. Okay. So number two, any class you created in the same project, of course. So for example, if we talk about, let's say your tutorial week number 8, where I think we talk about one class called facility, right? I'll just use that for example, right? Any class that you have created yourself. Okay. Number 3 over here. So these two, I believe, are the two items I mentioned when I gave the lecture. Okay. For number 3, it's a little bit of gray area. You got to be careful. Okay. No primitive type directly. For example, you cannot say something like this. If you say array list and then you simply put integer, int over here. So this is not allowed. Okay, if you try that in Eclipse, I think they will complain about the primitive type being used. Whenever you want to instantiate a generic parameter for some collection library, you have to pass either some library class or you have to pass some class you created. But what if I want to use an array list of integer? What should I do? There's something I didn't really mention in the class, so you don't need to worry about for the exam. But that's something you should really keep in mind. You should really you can learn. That's for your knowledge. Instead, use so-called wrapper class. Okay, you can. For those of you who might be interested, you can feel free to Google about Java wrapper class. You can see more information. Let me give you one example. So for example, rather than passing int over here, I'm going to say array list, and then capital letter over here, right? Remember I said before, the convention is all the class names should start with capital letter. So now it'll be integer. Okay, so now the follow-up question will be, what's the difference between int and also integer over here? Okay, it's really important to actually tell the difference between them. Okay, but Michael, so far, is it clear about what you can pass over there? You can only pass some reference type. Primitive type directly is not allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but I just want to say a little bit more about int versus integer. It's kind of important for you to clarify that conceptually. Okay, so I'm going to say int versus integer. Okay, number one, this is primitive. Is a primitive type. So integer here, capitalized, it's actually a reference type. Okay, and then the way we visualize it is maybe, for example, so here, if I say integer I, okay, so for example, it's assigned to 23, right? So now this will be basically just 23 over here, and then you say I, right? Just like a box. On the other hand, if you want to have integer objects, the reason that it's called wrapper is it kind of wraps around some integer value, the primitive value. So if I say integer class, okay, let's say objects, and then new. If you look at the constructor in the Java API for integer, it's simply just taking another integer value, primitive. So for example, 23, right? So now if you compare them, so you can see objects actually stores the address of some integer objects. So this will be integer. And then you can think about the integer object has some private attributes, maybe something called value. Okay. And then, so here the value there actually stores 23. Okay, so that's the difference conceptually between primitive value versus wrapper class. Okay, and how do you retrieve the store integer value? The way to do it would be you can say objects dot I believe it's called int value. You can double check. Okay, that's how you actually retrieve the value. Okay, but when you actually want to when you want to instantiate the generic parameter, you cannot just use primitive type directly. You have to use the corresponding integer. So if you look up the Java API library, so now, for example, let's say all the primitive type versus the wrapper class, right? Let me try to give you some example, the common ones. So for example, you got integer, you got float, you got double, and also you got maybe char, right? So these are all the primitive that we spoke about. So what would be the corresponding wrapper class? Int will be integer, and also float will be just float. You can see the naming convention is kind of systematic, right? You simply just capitalize the first character, and then double. I think you have seen integer and double already in your lab number 7 and 8 when you want to use a parse int or parse double, right? The static methods. And also, I think it's character. Okay. All right, so good. So Michael, is there any follow-up question to this for you?
So going back to the integer object, or int value is basically one of its accessor methods, correct?
Correct, correct.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Very
is that
cool.
one of the public accessor for sure? Yes. I believe it should be spelled like an int value, but I can double check for me. So I might be wrong, but I think something like that.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between when you do it integer object equals new integer 23 and when you just do int object equals 23?
So in Java, I believe it would be okay if you say integer. For example, let's say object 2. If you see, I think it might be possible for you to do. I'm not too sure. You can double check. So I think so this integer here, and then they say object number 2, and then you simply say 23. If you try to be strict over here, 23 is an int. If you think about it.
No, I meant int object, not integer object.
Int is not an object. Int is a primitive value.
Yes, like what's the difference between int I equals 23 and integer object equals new integer 23?
Well, here's the difference. This is a primitive value. There's an object value. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm. So why does that matter whether it's primitive or because sometimes it requires one and not the other?
No, actually, or remember there are two kinds of data types. One is primitive, the other one is like a reference type. So here, for the concept of numerical value, for without decimal points, you actually got either integer primitive value, which is just the value itself, versus if you got integer objects, you got other methods supported on that. For example, you can say parse int, and also you can say int value and etc. So if you go to the integer class in the Java API, you got other methods supported. Whereas for the primitive value, you don't have those methods.
Oh, okay.
All right, let me just finish this, even though that's not what you were asking. So just for your knowledge here, in Java, if you simply say integer and object 2, I think you will be able to say 23 directly, right? If you look at the type over here, 23 is an integer. If you try to be strict about the type correctness, how can you assign integer value into some integer object? For example, what we are really expecting will be some objects of type integer, but this is only integer value. Okay, this might be okay. You can double check yourself. Okay, on the Eclipse. So in Java, actually, there is something a little bit similar to the coercion process, which means it's done automatically for you without your permission. Okay, so there is something called boxing process. Okay, you can again you can Google for the boxing in Java. So this will simply, the boxing process will simply convert automatically int value to integer objects. So what I would do is, that's why it's called wrapper. You will simply just create some integer object over here and then wrap around this particular primitive value. But this one is only for your information, so you don't need to worry too much if you're confused. Okay. Joseph, you got another question?
Yeah, so the API array list, the table, I wanted to ask that why is the remove the return type E and the remove the return type boolean? Shouldn't it, isn't, since it's a mutator, shouldn't there be?
Yes, yeah. It's a good point. As I said in the lecture, you're right. Let me say that again. So remove for sure is supposed to really modify the current context object. For example, if I say L1 that remove Alan, I really meant to modify L1 the context objects. So according to our OOP principle, it should be that this should be just void. Absolutely. However, when developers try to contribute their library classes or their methods, they may not actually just want to have that clear separation, like a distinction. What they do is they try to do two things at a time in the same method. Not only that they will try to remove the method, but also they want to return some value, either true or false. So here, true. If the return value is simply true, that means it's actually removed. And if actually that's false, that means not removed. So the Java developer thought such return value may just give the user maybe some additional information. That's basically what I can say here. However, if you ask me about whether it's a good style, definitely not. You should really try to have a clear distinction between accessor or mutator. So you definitely have the right intuition about this method here for remove. It should be declared as a void return type. It should be. However, it's contributed by some other Java developers, so they may not have that kind of like a type restriction on themselves. So they will simply just have a return type, right? It's completely up to them, right? But I would say if you try to declare your own library, you really want to have such distinction. I think it's better.
Thank you.
All right, very good.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So about the lab, so I was having trouble making the text view outline in green. Can you show us how to do that?
Sorry, how to what? Sorry?
How to make the text view outline in green.
The text field.
Outline the text view in green.
In green? What do you mean in green?
Yeah.
Why do you want to make it in green?
You have to make a box, and you have to make around the text view, and you have to make the box.
You don't need to make a box. If you look at demo video, all you need to display will be the board and also the status. You don't need to make a box.
But in the lab, it says you have to make a box.
Oh, I think I can chime in. I think because you're highlighting like specific elements in like
I see what you mean. I might know what he's talking about. Let me see. Well, actually, if you had this question here for Lab 8, I suppose you had a similar question for Lab 7 as well, right?
Yeah, I couldn't finish Lab 7 on time.
Mm-hmm. All right, now I know what you meant. Okay, so with a little bit of help from Michael, of course. If you look at that over here, the GUI over here, you're talking about the box over here, right?
Yeah, so I don't know how to.
No. Here, when I say here, I'm just trying to explain to you the GUI layout. I'm saying that whatever there's actually box in green, so this part over here is the name of the player X. So if you look at
so we don't have
the
to
demo,
box
if you look at the
them.
demo video, that one has no box.
Oh, so you just want, Leo, what's the purple box for then?
The purple box is
The
telling
invisible
you when
text
you
view.
design your GUI, this here should be a text view. If I didn't put it, it's hard for me to mention that in the manual.
So, okay, so you want an invisible, but if it's invisible, how are you going to know if it's there or not?
Well, when you display when you display the status in the board, you will know that it's visible. If you have nothing to display, it would be invisible.
Oh, okay. So you don't want those boxes. Those are just for demonstration.
I think look at the demo video I created about how you can use the app, and then you will see.
Okay.
Another question from Joseph: how can you make the how you can enlarge the output? I think if you go to the text view on the design, I think one of the attributes over there is about the font size. Right, so Joseph, if you can try, you can just go to the font size, and then you can choose the size to be maybe rather than 12 by default, it can be 14. Right, give it a try. Okay, good. Yeah.
Professor, may I quickly ask a question? Like following the question about remove. So in that case, for the method add, is it the same thing? Like if you successfully add something,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
True.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So, however, guys, so Michael, for Michael and also Joseph, I think both of you actually asked about this question. Good question, actually. So here, if you look at the description here for add, it simply says appends the specified element to the end of the list, right? However, here you can see the short description here. It says nothing about the true or false that you might return. In this case, Michael, what should I do if I want to find out when to return true and when to return false? What should I do to find out?
I guess you can make assert equal statements or in JUnit tests and
yes, absolutely, Michael. I agree with you. You should definitely try to create an object and try it out to see what's really returned. Good. However, I would say that there's even more time saving mechanism. You should double click on this link and go to the detailed description version for the method. Presumably, they should mention that in the detailed description. So I would say do that one before you write a test. I would suggest. All right. All right, guys. Any more questions about generic parameter over here? So as I said, I'm sorry that I just cannot say too much about generic parameter. The more I say, the more confused you might be, because I haven't really taught you about inheritance. So if you happen to take a 2030 with me, I don't know yet if I will be teaching it. If you happen to take that course with me, maybe in the fall, in that case, we will actually go through some thorough discussion about Java inheritance. And then after inheritance, it will be much easier for you to understand why you want to use generic parameter. But as far as this course is concerned, just know how to use it. That'll be enough. Okay.
Professor?
Yep.
I have one more question. For I don't know how general this question is, but when you mentioned the object parameter, object O,
yeah,
you mentioned that like it basically encompasses all data types.
Yeah.
And so does that mean or imply that, for example, a primitive data type like integer or double is considered an object?
Yep, exactly. Okay, why? Let's take a look. This will be okay. You know what? Let me. That's good, Michael. That's a good question here. Oops. So give me one moment. All right. Let's say this. So the short answer is yes. If you simply pass some primitive type, it would be okay if that's the right type. Actually, well, in this case, all the type will be accepted. So let's say, for example, so now we're still talking. We're talking about this particular header over here. Okay. Let me now try to just get this particular one. Okay. Let me just open a new page. So I don't think I need this anymore. Let me delete it. Okay. This one here. Okay, good. Okay, let's now talk about this one here again. Remove. Okay, the remove method we're talking about. Okay, since it is objects, so that means we can pass any objects, any reference type, and also any primitive type. However, there's something I want to discuss quickly. Okay, remember we spoke about something called boxing over here. Okay, boxing will simply just happen again. Okay, so here let's try this. Let's say if I got maybe array list, and then let me say string, and then I would say list. Okay, whatever that's after that, right? Accordingly, every occurrence of E will just be replaced by string. And this will just be string over here. And now, of course, if I want to say list.add, I definitely should pass a string value. But now if I say list.remove, because it's simply just objects, I can pass any object. Let's see some example. So I can say list.remove over here. And now if I say Alan, this will just be okay, right? Alan string is considered as an object. I can also say list.remove. And also P1, assuming that P1 is actually some point objects. So this will be okay as well. Point is also an object. Everything is an object. And now here, if I try list.remove, let's say 23, okay? This will be okay as well because boxing will happen as well, implicitly. So what's going to happen is 23 will be implicitly boxed into new integer 23. So writing this over here is as if you wrote new integer 23, like anonymous objects. But if you didn't do it, Java will actually do this for you. It's called automatic boxing. So Michael, does that answer your question? That's what you were asking, right?
Yes, that's very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Although I think people got different thoughts to this. I personally don't quite like that Java simply does such conversion for you because it can be a little bit confusing because you might be wondering why would this work. For example, here you number one, the list is declared to store string only. However, you allow objects, right? That's one design flaw to me, right? To me, it's a design flaw. Number one. Number two, if I can pass anything over here, but 23 is a primitive value. It's not exactly just an object over here. It's not really. However, Java thinks maybe this will be a very common demand from Java developer when they write their code. So they will simply just be so kind to actually do some automatic boxing for you. But to me, I think for me as a Java developer, maybe I should be forced to actually write this myself. So I'll be clear about whether I want to use a primitive value or a reference value, right? It's a design issue over here, right? But anyway, so automatic boxing for you to know about, okay? All right, any more questions about Java API over here?
So Professor, so then that means that like the parameter object is still like it doesn't bend any kind of rules, like because it does the boxing for you. So the 23 actually just become an object. So
yeah, so 20, yeah, good. So if you think about only 23 alone, 23 itself does not really satisfy object type, does not, because 23 is a primitive type. 23 is only an integer. However, in Java, they actually will try to convert 23 into its integer counterpart for you. So now if you look at integer over here, it is matching the object over here. So this will be okay. If you only try to think about strictly conceptually, 23 does not really match the objects. But after the automatic boxing into integer over here, it will be okay. Yeah, so you wrap the primitive data type into an object. That's basically what you're doing. All right. All right, anything else about the remove here? All right. So Michael, do you have any more question on your list?
Yes, but it is past this point in lecture. So you moved on to the case study for ArrayList using like example code.
Okay. So you mean your next question is about ArrayList still?
Yes, but it's past this slide. Sorry, that's what I'm trying to
Oh,
say.
you mean about the example, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I already deleted that. So maybe let me bring it back if you want me to talk about it. Oh, sorry.
should I wait? Should I wait for like others to ask more questions about this before
yeah, we can see. If you other guys got any more questions, feel free. But let me just copy that page first of all, the array list. Let me copy that first. Yeah, we can handle this first. That's okay. So Michael, is there a particular line you're confused, or you want me to just maybe trace from scratch again?
I'm just confused about line 5.
Line 5.
Because I was looking, yes, just line 5, because I was just trying to understand because you said the value that it returns is 0 because the array is empty. Yep. But then I was looking at the what was it called? The Oracle docs for
in the API page.
The API page, yes. And the empty constructor says in its description that it constructs an empty list with an initial capacity of 10. So I don't know what that like how to wrap my head around.
Very good, very good. I would say this this corresponds very well to our programming pattern. Okay, so you can think about the get size over here. Let's talk about point collector. Okay, quickly. Point collector over here. And then let's say let's not worry about private. I'll just save some writing. If I say point array, PS, integer counter, number of points, NOP over here. And then, of course, we're going to initially create the PS. And we know pretty well how this programming pattern works. So I'm going to omit the details, right? And over here, we know, let's say this. If I say point collector, PC is assigned to new point collector. Right, Michael, remember that typically we'll tell you what the maximum, what's the maximum number of objects or point object you can store in the array. So that concept is about capacity, okay? So now if I say PC, let me visualize it. Let's say after this particular line, so PC is pointing to an array, an objects over here. So that's point collector. And then we actually got two attributes, points array and also NOP. Okay, and PS is going to store an array. For example, we might say the maximum number of objects you can store will be, let's say 100. So that'd be from 0 to 99. So you can think about the 100 over here is about the capacity. On the other hand, how many point objects have we stored so far? 0. And how is that 0 indicated? Here in the NOP. So you can think about list.size over here. Conceptually, is analogous to the PC.NOP. And the capacity that you saw in the API is analogous to the maximum. Remember in the tutorial, we would say maximum number of points. Okay, Michael, makes sense to you?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah, so you can see actually the array list in some way corresponds very closely to the programming pattern we had about using the primitive array together with integer counter. I think this programming pattern here is really fundamental, that really forces you to really implement all the methods using loops from scratch yourself. That really is the best for you to learn as a beginner. Okay. Okay, that's about this case study here. So guys, do you have any questions related to this example code, which I did in the lecture? If you haven't gone over that, it might be good for you to go over that. You can ask me again during the review session for the exam. Okay. Any more questions? From Sarah, about lab number 8, should we put any condition for when the names are the same? No, you don't need to. I see what you mean. So you got player X, you got player O. What if they have the same name? You don't need to worry. So no, you don't need to worry. Even if you got Jackie playing with himself, that's okay, right? Jackie played against Jackie, that's fine. So you don't need to worry about that. Michael, do you have any more questions on your list?
No, I haven't gone through the rest of the lecture material.
That's okay. Okay. Why don't I just go over a little bit of detail over here, some information for you guys. Okay, let me just go over that quickly. Okay. So guys, several things I want to say quickly. So if you go to our MMN e-class, you will see that I also sent you a link yesterday. So there is a survey over here about review session for the exam. If you click on that, you can actually specify which time you actually prefer to actually hold the session, right? So far, I got 20 of you, okay? Maybe you have specified already, maybe you haven't, please do so if you're interested in the review session. So our exam will be April 20th, right? Let me run a little bit of, let me show you the calendar over here. You can see we are here. And then your lab number 8 will be due on Friday, right? So just make sure you finish that as soon as possible. And then on Tuesday the 13th, it will be your study day, okay? 2 weeks from now, yes, good. So 13th of April will be your study day, okay? I may not bother you because you actually got other things to study for, not just this course. Our exam will be April 20th over here. So Michael is right, about a little bit more, 1 day more than 2 weeks from now. Okay, so I think maybe the best timing for your exam review session will be maybe 15 and 16, maybe right before the weekend, before the exam. So either we can choose 1 day from here, and also maybe the day before the exam for the last minute questions. Okay, so 15, 16, and 19th. So that's actually the time you will see on the review session, right? And then you can choose all the time slot that will make that will work for you. If you really got exam conflict, that's okay. The session I'll try to record it, but I think it might be better for you to attend live. So you can always ask me follow-up questions if you wish. That's number 1. Number 2, you can go to the MMO, the common e-class site, right? If you go there, you will see that we actually posted under the exam section over here. So there is the PDF for exam information. Just go there to go over some policy about the exam. What if you miss the exam? And what will be the formats, and what will be the coverage, and etc. Right? It's going to be the exam common to all the 3 sections. So look at the information. If you got any confusion, let me know. I can answer that. All right. That's something I want to mention quickly. All right. If you have voted for the exam review session, that's good. I'll wait for maybe a few more days just to see how your how the voting goes, and then I will finalize the time by the end of the week. Okay. And I think for the exam review session, I will make it maybe just make another Google Doc for you to post your question maybe in advance, so you can get more prepared yourself too. All right, guys. Any more questions about any of your lectures or tutorial videos? You can feel free to let me know. Otherwise, if you're shy, I still got my office hour tomorrow, Tuesday, and also Wednesday, 1 p.m. Feel free to come by if you want to. Okay, Michael, any more questions? You said no, right? That's all your questions. Very good. Very good. Okay. All right, guys, I'll pause for a little bit longer. Okay, so in case you got questions, you can feel free. If you got other things to get busy with, feel free to leave, and then I'll see you later. Okay, any more questions? 3, 2, 1. All right. All right, guys, thank you very much for coming. And then that will be about it for our weekly Q&A. Thank you for joining us throughout the semester. I really enjoy it. And then we got maybe about most likely 2 more exam review sessions, and then we'll answer more of your questions. All right. Joseph, you got one last question. Go ahead if you want to ask.
Professor, are you going to drop our lowest mark?
Yeah, so some of you actually asked me about if I'm going to drop the lowest mark for the lab or for the test. I'm afraid the answer would be no. The reason is, so since we presented our syllabus in the beginning of the semester, if you look at the grading scheme table over there, you can see every lab and also every test will actually count. So we cannot really adjust. We cannot really drop the marks, because that in some way that'll be like violating the grading table. But I would say if you really didn't do so well for a particular assessment, just try to do better for the later one. Hopefully that can compensate. And then at the end of the day, we'll try to look at everybody's performance, and then we might make some minor adjustment, right? How minor it will be up to my judgment later. But I'm afraid to your answer, I have to say straight away, so we wouldn't drop any marks for your assessment. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
No problem. No problem. All right, guys, again, thank you so much. And I'll see you in the exam review session. Best of luck. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.